Kia ora koutou. Welcome to another HR Chats with me to Radar, where we chat all things HR and HR related. Today, artificial intelligence. If I had $1 for every word or every time that I have heard the phrase artificial intelligence, I would have many dollars. It is the best of times, the worst of times. A lot of concern from people, but also a lot of people saying, look, this has absolutely revolutionized the way I go about my day to day business. But how does it relate to HR? So within HR, it's quickly moved from theory to practice within the recruitment sphere. For many employers, including those in New Zealand, the question is no longer whether AI will feature in hiring, but how to use it responsibly, how to use it transparently, and in a way that genuinely improves outcomes for both employers and candidates. No better person to talk to than Alan Price. Alan is Deel's Global Head of Talent Acquisition. They have done a lot of work around how employers and hiring managers are rethinking hiring at scale, and they have a lot of experience with using AI in both the efficiency and fairness spheres in recruitment. Kia ora, Alan. How are you?
I'm great. I'm great. How are you?
Look, I'm excellent. You're beaming in today from beautiful Amsterdam. It's the morning where you are, it's the evening where we are. But regardless of that, AI never sleeps.
It does not. No, I've got my bots working right as we speak.
Right as we speak. Hey, Alan, head of talent acquisition at Deel. What does that involve?
Um, in short, we're in a very busy period in terms of hiring because we've just launched 2026 hiring. We hire maybe 300 people a month at this point, across 120 countries. So in terms of employment, it's very complex. In terms of volume, very complex to hire 300 people a month. We typically tend to get 1.3 million applications, or that's what we did last year. So a lot of processing, trying to find quality in a big application volume is what keeps me busy.
Look, 1.3 million applications. You don't have warehouses full of people shuffling through CVs, I imagine.
I do not know. We've got AI for that actually. We can come on to that. Yeah.
We will. Hey, look, a very good place to start. It can be a little bit intimidating, I suspect, when it comes to thinking of using AI in hiring. So if we strip away the headlines, what's actually changing in recruitment right now when it comes to AI today as it is?
Oh, there's a lot. There's candidates using AI to apply for jobs, which I think is seeing an uptick in volumes of applications. Writing CVs, which I think is a good thing actually, like to better present yourself. Um, there's some security things around making sure that the person has the skills that they need to do, not simply using AI to formulate good answers, right? There's also employers looking for an AI literate workforce and what skills to test for, not just kind of buzzwords or I've done this project using AI and kind of buzzword answers, and then the interviewer not necessarily being, as informed about using AI in their day-to-day practice, but they're the ones evaluating different candidates coming in and who want an AI literate workforce. There's obviously a lot of processing, there's interview notes, there's analytics, there's a whole host of different things. The sphere is really accelerating.
Absolutely. You get a sense that you've got AI doing the recruiting, responding to AI produced CVs, and then I think I watched some stuff before as well on Deal. Even perhaps an AI interface initially for those candidate interviews.
Yeah.
The human factor is obviously still going to be crucial amongst all of that.
1,000,000%. Yes. In the end, getting a job is very much a human endeavor. And when we think about what a job is, it's to be able to provide for your family, it's to be able to give yourself a kind of a good life, to improve your life, to pay for your bills, all of these things. So you want to have a huge amount of trust that the organization that you're going to is the right cultural fit for you. So no degree of AI is going to be able to comfort that person that they're making the right decision and also the hiring team, again, that we're making the right decision in terms of who we're bringing in culturally to our organization. So that human endeavor absolutely has to be front and center. However, there's also ways that you can use AI to humanize the process and explain to the people you want to explain it to more deeply and spend more time with those candidates in greater detail.
Yeah.
So AI is really enabler of time to give to hiring teams to be able to, yeah, identify the right cultural fits for our organization.
Yeah. Because that is the big fear, I suppose, that people think that AI is going to remove that human element from the process. But in your experience, and you have been using it a lot, how does that sit at the moment?
Yeah, so I mean, listen, we can come on to. I'll give you one example, right? So we have last year we had 1.3 million applications. It's actually rising. We're on track for about 1.7, 1.8 million this year. If I look at prorating January and March, sorry, January and February. Um, Historically, recruiters to process 600 applications per job, they would sit like this clicking through CVs and they'd go through those 500 applications. They'd probably stop at 150, 180, where they've got 10, 11, 12 calls booked of those 100 and 150 applications. And the later applications that come in, you're kind of on hold, right? You don't really necessarily get a chance to interview because the recruiter is busy because they've already selected their 10 or 12 candidates that they want to interview for that job. But yet, the correlation of best candidate across if you apply super early or really late in the process, there's no correlation to where the best candidate is. So, AI at the CV review stage deployed is able to understand the different variants, factually and binary, of yes or no. Do they have this experience? Because all a CV is experience, right? Do they have this experience that would pass them through to the next step? And so you're able to screen through and provide fairness to the entire application, whether they applied early or late, to understand who are the right experience-led candidates to fit your profile. And what we actually saw was AI was better at screening CVs. So in one of our areas in technology, we would interview 18, 19 candidates at recruiter screen in order to make a hire, like 18 or 19 candidates, right? Then when we started using AI, we actually dropped it to 14 interviews to get a hire, right? And these are the same roles, like a back-end engineer. It's just the same, basically, all the way through. It's one of our pipeline roles. So what was really interesting there was two things, right? Number one, we have to do less calls to make a hire because the quality wise, we're able to identify people across the stack who had the right skills, and they would have a higher conversion rate. And number two is because you took out a few hours of time in terms of reviewing those CVs, and they could be done in 20 minutes or something like that, then you gave that time back in order to do more calls. So we saw recruiters having a massive efficiency gain of reducing their recruiter screen to higher rates and then using that time to do more calls. So in the end, our recruiters are jumping from 4 hires to 6 hires and getting that 30% kind of improvement, not by working any harder, but just by being more efficient.
Yeah. And I imagine you can set it up as a little drafting gate as well, not fit for this job, but actually there's something else over there that we think this candidate would be great for, and it will just channel them through to somebody else.
Exactly that. Exactly that. So at Deel, we're quite fast paced, right? I mean, you can see from the numbers in terms of our revenue and our growth, it's pretty fast. And you know, I don't think the organization would mind saying that we we sold so much payroll and payroll implementation at the back end of the year surpassing our revenue targets. We smashed our revenue targets and our growth. But then operationally, you have to, do payroll implementation, onboarding, customer success, all of these things. So what we found was that there was a couple of teams that had sold payroll implementation that we weren't forecasting, so we had to increase the size of the team in order to deliver for our clients. So we quickly took that and we looked at our database in certain countries that we needed payroll experts. We identified within 10 minutes 288 candidates already on our database that were fit for this job. They were interested previously, but like the analogy of applying late last time, they didn't have an opportunity. Or it could be someone who interviewed a year ago, didn't quite have the skills or whatever, but a year later, maybe they do. So we then combed through, immediately we found 288 profiles. We reached out to all of them. And we had, 60, 70, 60, 70, 80 calls booked like within the next 2 days
Yeah.
to deal with that. So that's an example of being able to react very quickly to business demand.
Yeah. I mean, terrible problem to have. Hey, look,
Yeah.
in New Zealand, we most of the companies are not going to go through 1.3 million applications, unless, of
Yep.
course, we did have an IKEA open last year, and I think that's about how many applications they got for that, which says a lot about us. Uh, but for smaller businesses in New Zealand, working at that smaller scale, what lessons can be applied for those smaller companies out of all this?
Well, so you can deploy AI in a time, cost, quality kind of perspective, right? So you build a house, time, cost, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that um, for a small business, it's even more critical that you get the right person to your organization, right? Um, and simply being able to record an interview, transcribe into interview notes, being able to revisit those interview notes, and also have kind of context because you're going to be busy during the day trying to grow the business. And then maybe your interview notes aren't quite what they seem, right? You thought that you remembered that candidate, and at the end of the day, when you come to write your interview notes, all of the candidates kind of merge into one. And you're like, well, I kind of remember that person, so therefore I think that, I had a good feeling, so therefore, but you don't know if you necessarily ask the questions. These are the 10 skills that I wanted to ask, and did I actually test all 10 skills during those interview experiences or across the team? You know, that the complexity of interview. I'll give you an example. So at Deel, we use a company called MetaView, which is a voice interview transcribing tool, right? There's a number of things that you can do with it. So, firstly, you record the interview, so you're able to revisit. Number two is it writes and transcribes your interview notes, and you can structure it in any type of format, wherever. So, any of the interview questions. Maybe it's a skills questions, maybe it's a behavioral question, maybe it's an experience question, maybe it's a situational question. You can structure all of your notes to summarize all of the categories that you want to do, and it will use that scorecard to populate the answer, not just transcribe a question and answer session. Then you can use AI to ask questions, not only if you forgot, oh, hey, like did I ask salary? I haven't got it written down, or whatever it is. You can ask AI through all of the candidate interactions. Um, did you ask for the salary? Did you cover this skill? Did you cover this skill? Whatever it is, right? And then you can actually build some very easy dashboards around candidate comparisons, right? And what we tend to do is, did we cover all of the 10 skills? And we have a rating system of no, partially, or like extensively, right? So then you're able to see all of the different candidate interactions. Did you cover for some of those skills? So I think, especially with like a SMB business, is even more critical to be able to, identify the right people because a costly bad hiring decision could be far more disruptive to that business. So
Yeah.
there's plenty of ways that you can deploy AI to just help writing notes and organizing yourself, um, or recording interviews. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. What about bias? We've seen previously through various things that bias can sort of slip in or be inbuilt into some of these systems. When it comes to AI, people need to be conscious of that kind of bias that they may be putting in or that may be coming through the system.
Yeah, absolutely. But listen, it's all about the quality of the prompts and the quality of the person. So what we see is that already there's an inherent bias, right? So I'll answer the question like what I see in my current role and also for the smaller businesses as well. But there's a bias around I've worked at this large organization, for instance, right? Then there's inherent bias. How do they get into that organization, right? About being able to afford university fees and all of these things. And if you've worked at the big blue chip kind of companies previously, you probably have a leg up potentially to help you in terms of getting access to those jobs, right? So it's really difficult to break into those top tier organizations. Yet there's a bias of when I look at the CV and I see like a prestigious organization there, naturally, you're going to select those CVs or people that are already in your industry. What we actually saw when we did a world record attempt where we were trying to hire 250 salespeople in, pretty much 6 weeks, was that we deployed AI not only at the CV review stage, but also at the early screening stage, where it's like an AI interviewer, just to give fairness to people to be able to give us more context beyond the CV in order for us to select candidates to come through the interview process. And what we actually saw, which is really interesting, the people that worked at the big, larger organizations, they weren't the ones that were best performing during the interview. It was actually more meritocratic, skill-based enablement. So that was really interesting. I think we don't like to make AI make decisions for us. I don't think regulators like that either, and I don't think that the trust in you build in the system for AI to make a decision for you is going to really work. So it's really a human endeavor. However, there are certain data points that I want to evaluate more so on the interviewer actually, because if the interviewer is asking great questions, the AI is being able to feed back and give interview tips to specific examples, not generic examples, then you improve the quality of your interviewer and therefore you can improve your quality of hire. So if you have better interviews being conducted, then we expect to have better outcomes. So it's all about training aids and enablement for interviewers to make better decisions, and therefore it's still a human endeavor sport. There are a lot of biases that humans still have during the process, but with AI, you're able to identify some bias risks in terms of the questioning or in terms of decision trees, and to be able to give data and inform the hiring team as to resurfacing some of those biases, actually. So I think it's actually, again, I think it's actually humanizing and providing a better experience for candidates.
Absolutely. And for those candidates, I guess transparency is important as well to say, hey, look, we're putting these through a particular filter, or indeed, we are going to interview you with an AI chatbot, for example.
Yeah, well, fully agree on all of our job descriptions. I think it's really important to be transparent. All of our job descriptions, all of our correspondence, we're very clear about using AI, and I think that other organizations should also be as clear as well. Yeah.
Yeah. If a candidate says, I don't want to be interviewed by AI, what would you say to them? Just say,
Um,
I want a person. I want a human.
yeah. Yeah, listen, so I think it really depends on what it actually is that you're interviewing for. Because culturally, in a organization, um, if you are leaning in and using AI, you should expect AI to be part of your interviewing kind of process, right? Um, AI for me is an enhanced screening tool at the top end, and analytics through the interviewing process. Now, you also need to be able to opt in and opt out of that, right? So, for instance, with the video recordings that we do, we have an opt in and opt out. So, if a candidate really does not want to have those interviews recorded, then they can opt out. We'll still do the interview, and there will be no judgment on that interview being done, and it won't correlate to any outcomes of hiring decisions that we do. So you should be able to opt in and opt out. But in today's day and age, you should expect AI to play a far more prominent role than what it did a couple of years ago,
Yeah.
and expect that to increase in the
Yeah.
future.
Different, do you think, for a big business like Deel versus, some of the smaller businesses in New Zealand that are going to start to be using it or are using it currently? Is there a slightly different expectation? Do they need to frame things perhaps a little bit differently? Because we're a gloriously mom and pop sized economy
Yeah.
down here.
Yeah. I think that there's going to be a number of different businesses. At the moment, the big trend is around kind of tech and how AI is using kind of big tech. And I think that they're always going to be the leaders of the space, right? But over time, you're going to have some of the middle of the market or potentially kind of, later adopters actually deploying AI to drive efficiency. So mom and pop businesses or small businesses or businesses that are manufacturing or like the bricks and mortar kind of businesses will start to use AI, right? And they'll start to, you know, they'll use assistive AI to start. So how do you write job descriptions? What are the interview questions? All of these things like help me do a bit better. Then you've got like the selective part around, you know, here's here's a CV review. I've got some applications, all of these things. So I think there will be definitely, and then a lot of businesses will start to use AI in their current business as usual practice, and then potentially they'll want some people to come in where you don't know necessarily about AI and the transformational kind of impacts, but somebody else does potentially, and then you start to think, hey, this is a new skill that I want to bring into the organization to drive some efficiencies, and I think that actually a lot of the small medium businesses, those bricks and mortar businesses, there's probably a lot of efficiency improvements versus very operational tasks that people are doing to be able to speed up
Yeah.
or assist in general workflows.
Thinking particularly when it comes to hiring, respecting candidates' time during that hiring process. If there are businesses that are doing a lot of hires, that ability to make that process really streamlined, and that everything gets a response, and that people know that their CV's actually been looked at, that they're not, at that 118, 119 cutoff where people are going, God, that's enough. We've seen enough.
Exactly. Yeah. And I mean, listen, we were trying to get to CVs reviewed in 7 days of application date, pre-AI. We had 60,000 people that were outside of that service level. And it was so difficult for us to be able to bring that down. And it was a lot of time, energy, and effort. Slack messages every day. Hey, we need to get the applications down. We need to get the applications down. And then it's just a big heavy lift. Now we've got it down. We're almost at zero, right, for those applications there because you're able to respond back in a couple of days, right? So I think that that's really helping. That's really helping respond back. And then if you have the interview notes, then you're not chasing hiring teams for feedbacks. So a lot of times it's like, oh, recruiters are ghosting me. It's like, no, it's just that, well, in some instances, yes, but in some instances, it's a hard job for recruiters chasing back interviewers with feedbacks, right? And then all they get is no, not a fit, right? The scorecard. So the recruiter can actually be like, well, you've got no excuse, hiring manager. We've given you all of these tools. You've invested in these tools. We're recording the interviews. It transcribes all of your interview notes. You can write that you can write better feedback to us and actually partner with us to make sure that we provide a better candidate experience. And the recruiters can also rewatch the interview. So when they get no, not a fit, and I was like, okay, but please can you elaborate? We've got all of these tools for you, but I'm going to rewatch and summarize this interview within and watch key parts of that interview. I can see myself like how some of the interviewers kind of gone actually record back and respond back to that. And you can also start to see around kind of candidate experience as well and making sure that, every single candidate has a great experience through the interview process and you can rewatch some of those interviews. So I think like candidate experience for us has dramatically gone up. When I started, we were at plus 14 on a net promoter score. And now we're at plus 68 in terms of like attractors, promoters, and plussing and minusing each of those off. And so that's been a really key indicator that speed is a lot faster. Quality, we believe through our interview trainings is going to be a lot better, which then correlate to quality of hire. And then the candidate experience part as well is also dramatically improving.
Yeah, look, Alan, I'm sure there's a lot of recruiters and hiring managers listening to this at the moment, thinking, "Oh, crikey, I'm gonna have to upskill myself a little bit." What new skills are they going to need when it becomes more integrated into the general hiring process? Anything that you could specifically point to?
There was a phrase that when I first started my career, I went into banking, right? And there was a phrase that really stuck with me. And I think it's especially true today because when I do a straw poll to say, do we think AI is going to have more or less significance than today in the next year, 2 years, 3 years? What does 5 years look like in terms of hiring and the adoption of AI? And the majority think it's going to dramatically, it's going to improve, right? And or maybe not improve, but maybe, but it's going to become a way more prominent than what it is today. So we already know the direction is going that way. So why not get ahead early versus be late to the party? So there was a phrase that struck with me in this bank, and there was a poster, and it said ride the wave of change. If you're not riding it, you're underneath it. And I think that for a New Zealand kind of podcast, that's probably kind of true, right? Where you're surfing, you're having fun, you're exhilarating, you're riding the wave. But if you fall, you're getting barreled underneath the wave, and it's not fun fighting and trying to get air and trying to get breath. So I think that, that's especially true today. So I'd encourage everyone to try something, try and upskill, ride the wave of change and have fun doing it versus not riding it, being very resistive, and then getting barreled years later underneath it.
Absolutely. On a personal level, what's the what's the most surprising thing you've used AI for in any of its many forms? If you've got, God, this is great. What a game changer.
Oh. Um, did I respond well to this situation? Did I read this well? This person texted me this, and I responded like that. Like, what do you think? And then so I use it quite a bit for that, right? And just to kind
Yeah.
of check myself. And then I asked for a summary. I'm not going to repeat what the summary was of what are my personal development points. And then so I used it to so I've fed in all of the data, all of the conversation points that I had. Help me be better. And
Yeah.
then what would you recommend me do? And change in terms of personality or change in terms of approach or empathy or all of these things. And I got some pretty interesting kind of results. And I think that was really quite cool because I also allowed that if they weren't sure and they were making a judgment on with little data and like making a judgment because that's what AI can do. Ask me a question. If you're not 100% certain on this topic, ask me a clarifying question and I'll answer it for you. And that was really interesting to get psychoanalyzed by AI. It was quite
Yeah.
interesting and And hopefully I'm a better person because of it. I don't
Well,
know. Yeah.
let's hope so. Let's hope so.
Yeah.
To be honest, I think we've all probably had a little bit of a go with you've put your details in. You said, "Well, how am I doing? Am
Yeah.
I okay?" Yeah, it's good.
Yeah, exactly.
Brilliant.
Exactly.
Alan Price, Head of Talent Acquisition at Deel. It has been exciting, and it's only going to get more exciting, I imagine, in the next little while. If you could make a prediction, next 12 months, what's going to be the biggest shift, the biggest change, the newest thing that's going to come out where people will have to rethink, particularly let's keep it within this kind of hiring world, the world of HR. Is there anything you can see sitting there on the horizon that you think that's going to be an
Massive
absolute game
one.
changer?
Yeah. Workforces are going to want to have more AI literacy in their organization. Yet, a lot of the people today aren't necessarily using or adopting AI in a significant way. So there's a skills gap in terms of interviewer, and there's a new skill for candidates. So being able to bridge that gap, you're going to have a lot more case studies that you'll have an interface with a candidate portal to be able to use AI. Here's a case study, here's a prompt. AI is then going to have a data set built in. The candidate is going to be able to ask the AI for the data, for the questions, for to build the case study for a role-related experience, what they would a problem that they would typically solve in their job. The interviewer is going to come in and evaluate the case study. We'll be asking prompt questions of how did they leverage AI? Did they use AI to get the key themes of the data that was being shown, for instance? Did they just believe AI in terms of everything that was said to true, or did they challenge some things? Did they and just do solve real world examples? And that is going to be quite similar to what a software engineer does in terms of a kind of a code review or peer review exercise. And the platform that that's going to be done on is a two-sided place with AI on the candidate side and AI on the interviewer side. And that's a really big challenge because if you want to have an AI literate workforce and yet you're solely relying on a interviewing group that doesn't have the skills. They're only going to be believing in terms of buzzwords, and you may or may not get the outcome of people in your organization that actually really know AI, right? So I think that that's going to be a huge transformational shift that's going to be happening, yeah, very quickly.
Brilliant, exciting times. Alan Price, Head of Talent Acquisition at Deel. Many thanks. We could talk all day, I am sure. And then what we could do is then have AI summarize the chat and give us five great bullet points about what we talked about. And then I'll go off and have myself psychoanalyzed as well. It's been an
Exactly.
absolute
I'm sure
pleasure.
it'll be a great legal LinkedIn post.
It absolutely would be. I mean, I just used mine to help me tidy my desk. It was excellent, actually. Real good. We'll let you go about your day sitting over there in Amsterdam. It is the morning. Here in New Zealand, it is the evening. So, massive thanks to Alan Price. And for us, for now, that is all we have time for on HR Chats with me, Raider, where we have been chatting the wonderful world of AI in the hiring place. Many thanks, Alan.